Welcome to our insightful and impressive story today. Millionaire woke up from coma and discovered Maid had helped him change his life forever. In this heartwarming and inspiring story, we delve into the life of a wealthy businessman who, after a tragic accident, finds himself in a coma for several months. When he finally awakens, he discovers that his life has been transformed in a way he never could have imagined. At the center of this transformation is an unlikely hero, a dedicated and compassionate cleaning lady who has been by his side through it all. Throughout his recovery, this remarkable woman took care of his home, ensuring everything was in perfect order. But her impact was much more profound than keeping things tidy. She brought a sense of warmth and humanity to a life filled with luxury, yet lacking genuine connection. Her unwavering support and kindness offered him a fresh perspective on life and relationships. Inform us if you are enthusiastic about this narrative. If you are, press 1 if you found the video to be enjoyable. If this is not the case, press 0. Your comments are a great source of motivation for me to collect more stories that are uplifting and meaningful.
Millionaire wakes up from coma and discovers black cleaning lady has changed his life forever. The heart monitor maintained its constant rhythm, as it had done for the last 5 years. The cold light of the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston seeped through the window of room 507, where Leonardo Blackwood remained motionless. His face, once marked by expressions of command and determination, now showed an artificial serenity, the product of the deep sleep that had held him prisoner since that fateful December night. The fingers of his right hand moved slightly, an almost imperceptible spasm. Nurse Ruby, who was carrying out her morning routine of checking his vital signs, didn't notice the subtle change. She continued writing down the data on her clipboard, as she had done every morning for 3 years, ever since she had taken over the care of that special patient. The second movement was more pronounced. Leonardo's eyes began to flutter under his closed eyelids, and his breathing, which had previously been rhythmic, showed signs of change. Ruby, now attentive to the changes, quickly approached the bed, her wide eyes fixed on the patient's face. "Dr. Morrison, we need you in room 507 immediately." Her voice echoed down the corridor over the intercom. The next few minutes were chaotic. A medical team burst into the room, led by Dr. Morrison, a renowned neurologist who had been following the case from the beginning. Leonardo began to struggle against the endotracheal tube, his body reacting instinctively against the artificial invasion of his throat. "He's breathing on his own," Morrison announced, his calm voice contrasting with the tension of the moment. "Let's proceed with extubation." As the team worked, Leonardo's eyes finally opened, revealing disoriented blue irises. The light hurt him, and he blinked repeatedly, trying to adjust his vision to the world he hadn't seen for so long. His lips, now free of the tube, trembled slightly. "Mr. Blackwood, can you hear me?" asked Morrison, leaning over him. "If you can understand me, blink twice." Leonardo obeyed, his blink slow but deliberate. His throat was dry, and when he tried to speak, only a hoarse sound emerged. A nurse offered him small ice cubes, which he sucked down eagerly. "Where?" His voice came out rough, almost unrecognizable. "How long?" Morrison exchanged glances with his team before replying, "Mr. Blackwood, you were in a serious accident. You were in a coma for 5 years." The impact of that information hit Leonardo like a punch in the gut. 5 years. His empire, his connections, his life, everything could have changed drastically in that time. He tried to move, but his muscles, atrophied by time, barely responded to his commands. "His recovery will be gradual," Morrison continued. "We'll need to carry out a series of tests and start an intense physiotherapy program." Over the next few hours, Leonardo underwent various neurological tests. His mind, although slow, was surprisingly lucid. His memories from before the accident were intact. He remembered his company, Blackwood Enterprises, the billion-dollar negotiations, the lavish parties. During the examinations, a nurse casually mentioned that a woman visited her room regularly, bringing fresh flowers every week. "Alana," she said, "has never missed a visit in 5 years." The name meant nothing to Leonardo. Among the hundreds of employees, partners, and acquaintances that populated his memory, he couldn't associate that name with any face. Still, something about the information intrigued him. Who was this person who maintained such devotion during his deep sleep? At night, alone in his room, Leonardo watched the lights of Boston through the window. His reflection in the glass showed a different man from the one he remembered, thinner, more fragile, with grey hairs at his temples that hadn't existed before. The reality of his situation was beginning to weigh heavily on his shoulders. He needed to know what had happened to his business, his fortune, his life. But something troubled him even more. The mysterious Alana and her inexplicable loyalty. Why would someone maintain such dedication to a man in a coma with no guarantee of his return? The first week after Leonardo woke up passed in a haze of tests, therapies, and devastating discoveries. Sitting in his wheelchair by the hospital window, he held a tablet with trembling hands, scrolling through old headlines that recounted the collapse of the Blackwood Empire. Blackwood Enterprises declares bankruptcy. Financial scandal shakes corporate empire. Leonardo Blackwood's former partners investigated for fraud. Each headline was like a stab. During his coma, Winston Palmer, his right-hand man for 15 years, had orchestrated an elaborate embezzlement scheme. The company Leonardo had built up over 2 decades collapsed in a matter of months. "Mr. Blackwood?" Dr. Morrison's soft voice interrupted his dark thoughts. "Your lawyer, Mr. Richardson, is here." Maxwell Richardson entered the room, his impeccable suit contrasting with his sorrowful expression. Leonardo knew that look. It was the same one he gave his clients when he brought bad news. "Leo, old friend," Maxwell began, pulling up a chair. "I tried to protect what I could, but how much is left, Max?" "The mansion on Beacon Hill is preserved, thanks to a specific clause you included in the will. And there's an offshore account that Palmer couldn't touch, approximately $2 million. Leonardo let out a bitter laugh. $2 million. A tiny fraction of the billions he owned. "And Charlotte?" he asked about his ex-fiancée. Maxwell hesitated. She married Palmer 3 years ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Leonardo closed his eyes, remembering the $1 million engagement ring he had given Charlotte, the promises of eternal love, the plans for a future together. "Any other surprises I should know about?" "Your sister, Victoria, sold her shares as soon as Palmer took over. She lives in Dubai now with her new husband." Family betrayal hurt more than any financial loss. Victoria, his only sister, for whom he will pay for medical school and all the luxuries she has always wanted, had abandoned him without hesitation. "And the mansion, who's been looking after it all this time?" "Oh, that's interesting," Maxwell enthused for the first time. "An employee, Alana Winters. She used her own salary to keep the property in order. She turned down offers from buyers, fought off attempts to break in, preserved every detail of the house as you left it." Leonardo frowned. "I don't remember her." "She was new, starting just 3 months before your accident. She worked in the administration of the house." A knock on the door interrupted the conversation. The physiotherapist, Claire, entered, pushing a walker. "Time for your session, Mr. Blackwood." The exercises were excruciating. Each step with the walker felt like a marathon, his muscles protesting the effort. Sweat dripped down his face as he forced himself across the corridor. "You're doing very well," Claire encouraged him. Most patients take longer to achieve this progress. But Leonardo barely listened. His mind was focused on Alana Winters, the mysterious guardian of his legacy. Why would someone who barely knew him show such loyalty? What motivation would she have to preserve the property of a man who might never wake up? At night, alone with his thoughts, Leonardo examined a photo of the mansion on his tablet. The 3-story Victorian property was still as majestic as ever, the gardens impeccably maintained, 5 years of constant care, while those he considered family abandoned him without remorse. Mr. Blackwood, Ruby, the night nurse, entered with his medication. "I've brought something that might interest you." She placed a small photo album on his desk. "Alana used to leave these here. They're records of the changing seasons in the garden of the mansion. She took pictures so that you wouldn't miss anything." Leonardo opened the album with trembling hands. Each page revealed meticulously dated images. Roses blooming in spring, golden leaves in fall, snow covering the statues in winter. 5 years of silent dedication, lovingly documented by someone he wouldn't even recognize. A handwritten note fell from between the pages, "So that you don't miss a single moment of beauty. I'll be here when you wake up, Alana." For the first time since waking up, Leonardo felt something other than anger and bitterness, a growing curiosity about this woman who, in the midst of so many betrayals, had chosen to remain faithful to a sleeping man and his lost dreams. After 6 weeks of intensive rehabilitation, Leonardo was finally released from hospital. The black Mercedes waiting for him in the driveway was not his old armored vehicle, but a more modest model, rented by Maxwell for the occasion. The lawyer had insisted on accompanying him personally on his return to the mansion. "Alana doesn't know you're coming back today," Maxwell commented as the driver navigated the elegant streets of Beacon Hill. "She comes 3 times a week to look after the house. Today is one of those days." Leonardo adjusted his cane between his knees, observing the changes in the neighborhood through the window. New businesses had sprung up, others had disappeared. 5 years was enough time to transform even a traditional Boston neighborhood. The car turned the corner onto Chestnut Street, and the Blackwood mansion loomed imposingly before them. Leonardo felt a lump in his throat. The estate looked exactly as it did in his memories. The wrought iron gates gleamed in the autumn sun, the vines on the facade were perfectly pruned, and the Victorian windows sparkled, spotlessly clean. "Unbelievable," he muttered, noticing that even the old blue hydrangeas, his favorites, were still blooming in the front flower beds. As they approached the main entrance, they saw a black woman in her 30s, wearing simple jeans and a white blouse, kneeling by the garden. Her gloved hands were carefully removing weeds from around the flowers. "That's her," Maxwell indicated discreetly. "Alana." Leonardo watched her for a moment. There was a natural gracefulness to her movements, a dedication evident in every gesture. Her curly hair was tied up in an elaborate bun, and even from a distance, he could see the concentration on her face as she worked. The car's engine alerted Alana to his presence. She looked up and for a moment remained motionless, as if she couldn't believe her eyes. Then she slowly removed her gardening gloves and stood up, wiping the dirt from her knees. Leonardo opened the car door before the driver could help him. Leaning on his cane, he emerged from the vehicle with all the dignity he could muster. His eyes met those of Alana, who remained still, her hands now intertwined in front of her body. "Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, her melodious voice carrying a slight southern accent. "Welcome back." There was something in her way of speaking, a mixture of respect and familiarity that disconcerted him, as if she knew him intimately, even if he didn't recognize her. "Miss Winters," he replied formally, noticing how she shivered slightly when she heard his surname. "Apparently, I have a lot to thank you for." A shy smile appeared on her lips. "There's no need for thanks. I just did my job." "Your job ended when I fell into a coma," Leonardo countered, taking a step towards her. "However, you stayed." Alana looked away, focusing on the hydrangeas. "Some things are too important to be abandoned, Mr. Blackwood." Maxwell sniffed discreetly. "I'll let you two talk. Leo, I'll call you later to check on you." After the lawyer left, an uncomfortable silence hung between them. Alana was the first to break it. "Allow me to show you around. I've kept everything as you left it, but you might want to make some changes now." As they walked slowly towards the entrance, Leonardo noticed how she naturally adjusted her pace to his, without making a fuss about her current physical limitations. Inside the mansion, the familiar scent of cedar and lemon enveloped him. The antique furniture gleamed under the light coming through the tall windows, not a speck of dust visible on the surfaces. "Your office is exactly as it was," Alana commented, leading him down the corridor. "I've preserved all the documents and organized the important correspondence by date." In the office, Leonardo observed, astonished, the impeccable bookshelves, the old leather armchair kept in perfect condition, his favorite fountain pen still positioned precisely on the mahogany desk. "Why?" he asked abruptly, turning to face her. "Why devote yourself so much to preserving the things of a man who might never wake up?" Alana held his gaze, and for the first time, Leonardo noticed the depth of her brown eyes. "Because I believed you would come back," she replied simply, "and because everyone deserves a home to return to." There was more to that answer than her words revealed, an untold story that Leonardo suddenly felt the need to uncover. But before he could question further, Alana headed for the door. "I'll prepare some tea. You still prefer Earl Grey with a slice of lemon, don't you?" Leonardo nodded, surprised that she knew this detail about him. He watched her leave, her graceful silhouette disappearing down the corridor, leaving him alone with the strange feeling that, for the first time since he had woken up, he was truly at home. The following days brought a peculiar routine to the Blackwood mansion. Leonardo discovered that Alana had established a rhythm of her own in the house during his absence, a silent dance of care and maintenance that now had to adapt to his presence. On that particular morning, he watched her from his bedroom window as she pruned the rose bushes. There was something hypnotic about her precise movements, the way she treated each flower with reverence. One detail in particular caught his attention. She was talking to the plants, her lips moving in words he couldn't hear. Mr. Blackwood, the voice of Claire, his home physiotherapist, interrupted his contemplation. Are you ready for your exercises? During the physiotherapy session in the makeshift gym, Leonardo couldn't stop thinking about the discoveries he had made over the last few days. Every drawer opened, every cupboard inspected revealed more about Alana's meticulous dedication. He had found receipts for repairs, detailed notes on house maintenance, and even a diary in which she recorded weather changes that could affect the garden. You're distracted today, observed Claire, helping him with his strengthening exercises. Is something bothering you? Just trying to understand a mystery, he replied vaguely. After the session, Leonardo decided to investigate further. Taking advantage of the fact that Alana had gone out shopping, he went to the small office she used, adjacent to the kitchen. The room was modest, with a simple desk and methodically organized shelves. In one of the drawers, he found something unexpected, a folder marked with his name, containing newspaper clippings. They weren't headlines about his accident or the company's bankruptcy, but older articles, from when he was still building his empire. One in particular caught his eye, an article about a housing project his company had developed in a poor neighborhood in Augusta, Georgia. Are you looking for something specific? Alana's voice startled him. She was standing in the doorway, shopping bag still in her hands, her face a mask of calm that couldn't completely hide her apprehension. Forgive the intrusion, he said, lifting his briefcase, but I need to understand. Are you from Augusta? Alana put the bags on a chair and closed the door behind her. Her countenance changed, as if an important decision had been made. The Blackwood Gardens housing estate, she began, her voice soft but firm. My mother was one of the first residents. She was a cleaner, raising 3 children on her own. That project changed our lives. Leonardo remembered the venture, one of the first of his career, when he still believed that business could have a purpose beyond profit. Is that why you stayed? Out of gratitude? At first, yes, Alana admitted, sitting back in her chair. When I found out I was hired to work at the Blackwood mansion, it seemed like fate. But then I met the real Leonardo Blackwood, not the billionaire in the magazines, but the man who left thank you notes for the cleaning staff, who kept photos of every housing project in his office, who cried when he read letters from families thanking him for giving them a home. Leonardo felt his throat tighten. These were memories that he himself had buried, sacrificed on the altar of corporate success. How did you... The security cameras, she explained. Part of my job was to monitor the recordings. I've seen a lot more than you realize. A heavy silence filled the room. Leonardo looked again at the folder in his hands, realizing that each clipping told a different story from the one the world knew. Not the headlines about millionaire acquisitions, but reports about social impact, community change, lives transformed. When everyone started abandoning him, Alana continued, her voice breaking, I knew I couldn't do the same, not with the man who saved my family without even knowing it, but you sacrificed 5 years of your life. It wasn't a sacrifice, she interrupted, standing up. It was a choice. Every day I chose to stay, because I believed that the man I saw on those tapes, the man who built homes for people like my mother, deserved to have someone in his corner. Leonardo felt something warm run down his face and realized, surprised, that they were tears. He hadn't cried since he woke up from his coma, not even when he found out about Charlotte and Victoria's betrayals. I lost myself somewhere along the way, he admitted, more to himself than to her. I forgot who I was. Alana approached, gently taking the folder from his hands. Maybe, she said softly, but now you have a second chance to find yourself. At that moment, looking at the woman who had kept not only his home, but also the memory of his best self, Leonardo felt something awaken in his chest, a long-forgotten emotion, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper that he still didn't dare to name. The discovery of Alana's motivations created a new dynamic in the Blackwood mansion. Leonardo began to observe her with new eyes, noticing details he had previously ignored, the way she hummed jazz while organizing documents, her habit of leaving a cup of tea next to him during her long hours of physiotherapy, the discreet smile she offered when their gazes met. One particularly cold October afternoon, while he was going through old folders in his office, the doorbell rang. Leonardo heard Alana's familiar voice greeting someone, followed by another voice that made his blood run cold. Where is he, darling? I heard Leo was back. Charlotte. Leaning on his cane, Leonardo slowly stood up. Through the ajar door, he could hear the conversation in the entrance hall. You haven't been announced, Mrs. Palmer? Alana's voice sounded firm but polite. Mr. Blackwood is not receiving visitors without prior arrangement. Don't be ridiculous, Charlotte laughed, that musical laugh that used to enchant him. I'm practically family. Leo and I have history. History is just that, ma'am. Past. Leonardo smiled involuntarily at Alana's response. He decided to intervene before the situation escalated. It's all right, Alana, he said, emerging from the office. I'll see Charlotte. His ex-fiancée was as stunning as ever. Perfectly groomed blonde hair, impeccable Channel dress, discreet but visibly expensive jewelry. Her blue eyes sparkled at the sight of him, but Leonardo noticed something calculating in that glint. Leo, darling. She stepped forward to hug him, but he kept his distance, leaning more firmly on his cane. What do you want, Charlotte? She seemed momentarily disconcerted by his coldness. Well, I've come to see how you are. When I heard you'd woken up. After 5 years, he interrupted, or after discovering that I still have a few million saved up. Charlotte paled. How can you think that of me? Winston and I... Winston. Leonardo repeated the name with disgust. My ex-partner. The man who stole my company while I was in a coma. Your current husband. It wasn't like that, she tried to explain, her voice trembling slightly. Things were complicated. Winston said the company was going bankrupt, that he needed to take drastic measures, and marrying my fiancée was one of those measures? A heavy silence fell over the hall. Alana stood discreetly nearby, her presence a silent source of strength. I've come to make peace, Leo, Charlotte finally said, her voice honeyed. Maybe we could start again. Winston and I, well, things aren't going well. I've always thought about you, you know. Leonardo let out a bitter laugh. Of course you have, especially now that Palmer is being investigated for fraud, isn't he? Charlotte's eyes widened. Like you, I still have a few loyal friends, Charlotte. Maxwell keeps me informed about everything. Leo, please. She took a step towards him, her eyes watering. What we had was real. You know that. What we had, he replied calmly, was an illusion. I was convenient, rich, powerful in love. You were beautiful, ambitious, and very, very good at pretending to love. Charlotte glared venomously at Alana. And now, you've swapped a socialite for a maid. Watch your words. Leonardo's voice took on a dangerous tone. Alana has more dignity in the smallest gesture than you have in your entire superficial existence. You've changed, Charlotte whispered, backing away. No, Charlotte. For the first time in a long time, I'm being who I really am. Alana stepped forward, opening the front door. Allow me to escort you out, Mrs. Palmer. After Charlotte left, Leonardo stood motionless in the hall, feeling the weight of the lost years, the betrayals, the masks that everyone wore in their world of appearances. Are you all right? Alana asked softly, approaching him. I am, he replied, surprised to realize it was true. In fact, I'm better than I've been in a long time. She doesn't deserve your thoughts, Alana commented, gently guiding him back to the office. No, she doesn't, he agreed, watching as Alana automatically adjusted the cushion of her armchair. You know what's ironic? I spent years building an empire, surrounding myself with people I thought loved me, when in fact, the only person who showed true love was someone I didn't even know. Alana's eyes met his, and for a moment, something intense and unspoken passed between them. She quickly looked away, busying herself with organizing papers on the table. I'll prepare some stronger tea today, she said, heading for the door. You must. Leonardo watched her leave, noticing that his heart was beating faster. Charlotte's visit, rather than reopening old wounds, had only served to highlight the stark contrast between the self-interested love he had known and the silent dedication he was now experiencing. Autumn in Boston painted the trees in shades of gold and crimson, turning the gardens of the Blackwood mansion into an impressionist canvas. One particularly chilly evening, Leonardo found Alana in the library, organizing books by the light of the antique lamp. I didn't know you were still here, he commented, noticing how the soft light highlighted the delicate contours of her face. I was reorganizing your collection, she replied, holding up a leather-bound volume. During my coma, I read a chapter to you every week. You read to me. The doctors said that coma patients can hear. I started with The Count of Monte Cristo. I thought it was appropriate, considering the circumstances. Leonardo smiled, remembering the story of the unjustly betrayed man who returns for revenge. And we've finished all the classics? Almost, she smiled, a mischievous glint in her eyes. We were still missing Jane Eyre when you decided to wake up. The comment provoked a genuine laugh from Leonardo, the first in a long time. He approached the bookshelves, noticing small post-its marking pages in various books. They're the passages that touched me the most, Alana explained, noticing his interest. I marked them so I could reread them for you, in case you woke up confused or needed to reconnect with who you were. The thoughtfulness behind that gesture struck him deeply. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I tried, she admitted, lowering her eyes. There was so much I wanted to tell you, so many things I've learned about your life through these books, the objects in the house, the stories I've heard. Like what? Alana hesitated, biting her lower lip slightly. Like the fact that you keep a collection of thank you letters from families you've helped hidden behind the account books, or that you have an album with photos of every house you've built for needy families. Leonardo felt his heart race. These were parts of his life that he kept hidden from the corporate world, vulnerabilities that didn't fit his image as a ruthless businessman. I also found out about your mother, she continued softly. The yellow roses in the garden. They're her favorites, aren't they? That's why I was so insistent on preserving them. How? I found one of her diaries while I was cleaning out the attic. She wrote about how you as a boy promised that one day you would give her a garden full of yellow roses. Leonardo felt his throat tighten. His mother had died when he was just 12, leaving him with an absent father and an unfulfilled promise. When I bought this house, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, the first thing I did was plant those roses. No one ever knew why. I know, Alana replied simply, and in those two words there was such a deep understanding that Leonardo felt his eyes burn. A comfortable silence settled between them. Outside, the rain began to fall gently, creating a silver curtain against the library windows. Why didn't you ever get married, Alana? The question escaped before he could stop it. She seemed surprised by the change of subject, but answered with her usual honesty, I never met someone who made me want to change my life. And then I came to work here, and suddenly I had a purpose greater than myself. Caring for a man in a coma and his empty house? No, she corrected him gently. To preserve the essence of someone the world was too busy to really see. The man with the yellow roses, the hidden letters, the dreams bigger than his empire. Leonardo felt something change inside him at that moment, as if all the pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place, revealing an image that had been there all along. You know me better than anyone, he murmured, taking a step towards her. Maybe because I've had 5 years to find out who you really are, she replied, her voice just a whisper. The closeness between them was now almost palpable. Leonardo could smell the soft scent of jasmine that she always wore, see the small golden reflections in her brown eyes. And who am I, Alana? A man who planted yellow roses for your mother, she replied, her voice trembling slightly. A man who keeps thank you letters as if they were treasures. A man who deserves to be loved not for what he has, but for what he carries in his heart. The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of thunder. Alana stepped back quickly, her hands shaking slightly as she put away books that didn't need putting away. It's getting late, she said, her voice trying to regain its professional formality. You should rest, Mr. Blackwood. Leonardo, he corrected softly. After today, I think you can call me Leonardo. The week following the night in the library brought a subtle change in the dynamic between Leonardo and Alana. There was a delicate tension in the air, like violin strings stretched to the limit, vibrating with every glance exchanged, every accidental touch, every silence shared. During his morning physiotherapy session, Leonardo received a call that would change the course of events. Maxwell Richardson, his lawyer, had news about Winston Palmer. We've got the evidence, Maxwell announced. Palmer is trapped. With his authorization, we can start the process to recover a significant part of Blackwood Enterprises' assets. Leonardo watched through the window as Alana worked in the garden, protected from the cold by a navy blue coat. How much? At least 60% of the original value. Palmer embezzled funds, but he couldn't hide everything. With the evidence we have, he'll have to pay it back or face decades in prison. The possibility of recovering his empire made Leonardo's heart race. It would be his perfect revenge, to take back everything that had been stolen from him, to see Palmer and Charlotte fall apart. I need to think, he finally replied. Give me a few days. After hanging up, he kept watching Alana. She was now talking to Claire, the physiotherapist who had just arrived. Her laughter carried on the cold morning wind. "Mr. Blackwood," Claire called from the doorway, "are you ready to start?" During the exercises, his mind wandered between Maxwell's phone call and the revelations of the night in the library. Claire noticed his distraction. "Is something worrying you today?" "Claire," he began hesitantly, "do you believe that people can change fundamentally?" The physiotherapist adjusted her support before replying, "I believe that circumstances can reveal to us who we really are. Sometimes we need to lose everything to find our true essence." Her words echoed throughout the day. In the afternoon, Leonardo found Alana in her office, organizing old documents. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Alana looked up from her papers, her expression wary. "About Palmer. Maxwell called today. We have enough evidence to sue him and get a large part of the company back." Something flashed in her eyes, concern perhaps. "And what do you intend to do?" "That's what I came to ask. For 5 years, you've guarded not only this house, but also my essence. I need to know, who do you think I really am?" Alana stood up slowly, coming around the table to face him. "What do you mean? The man I was before the coma would have destroyed Palmer without hesitation. I would have savored every moment of his fall. But now you're not sure you want to be that man again," she added softly. "Exactly." Leonardo ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Revenge is within my grasp, but something has changed. I've changed. Because of the coma. Because of you," he replied, his voice charged with emotion. "How you preserved not just my home or my memory, but the parts of me that I myself had forgotten. The man with the yellow roses, remember?" Alana took a step towards him, her eyes shining with restrained tears. "Leonardo, for 5 years, you read to me, tended my garden, protected my most precious memories, not for money or power, but because you saw something in me that even I couldn't see anymore. I saw your heart," she whispered, "in the small details, in the choices he made, in the lives he transformed. I saw a man who deserved a second chance, not to reclaim his empire, but to rediscover his humanity." Leonardo felt his heart race. The closeness between them was electrifying, full of unspoken words and repressed feelings. "What if I choose not to prosecute Palmer? If I decide to leave the past behind, then you'll prove that the man I've seen all these years really does exist." Alana smiled softly. "Sometimes the greatest victory is not in defeating our enemies, but in overcoming who we were." At that moment, Leonardo realized he was on the edge of a precipice. On one side, his old life, the power, the revenge he had longed for. On the other, something new and frightening, the possibility of starting again, of being better, of loving and being loved not for his empire, but for who he really was. "I'm afraid," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. "Of what?" "Of not being worthy of the faith you've placed in me, of letting down the only person who really knows me." Alana touched his face gently, a gesture so intimate it made his breath catch. "The fear of not being worthy is exactly what makes you worthy, Leonardo." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the telephone. Alana quickly backed away, returning to her professional posture. But something had irrevocably changed between them. Leonardo's decision not to prosecute Palmer had caused a stir in his remaining social circle. Maxwell Richardson, in particular, was incredulous during his visit to the mansion that November morning. "Do you realize what you're giving up?" the lawyer questioned, pacing back and forth in his office. "Billions," asked Leo. "Years of work. Your legacy." Leonardo watched the scene with a calm that surprised even himself. "My legacy isn't in the bank account figures, Max. It's because of her, isn't it?" Maxwell stopped abruptly, casting a meaningful glance towards the door, where he knew Alana worked across the hall. "That housekeeper has been influencing you. Careful." Leonardo's voice took on a warning tone. "Alana showed me who I really am, not the other way around." Maxwell sat down heavily in an armchair. "Leo, we've been friends for decades. You've built an empire out of nothing. You're going to throw it all away because of a woman who spent 5 years preserving not just my home, but my humanity," Leonardo interrupted. "Yes, Max, that's exactly what I'm doing." The lawyer studied his client for a long moment. "You're in love with her." It wasn't a question, and Leonardo didn't bother to deny it. Instead, he got up with the help of his cane and walked over to the window. In the garden, the last yellow roses of the fall were still blooming, stubborn against the cold. Do you know why I planted those roses, Max? It was a promise to my mother. While I was building my empire, I completely forgot what they meant. But Alana, she found out for herself. She took care of them, as if she understood their value, not their price. And now, what's your plan? I'm going to start again. Not with revenge or power, but with purpose. Maxwell sighed deeply. Palmer will get away with it. Not exactly. Leonardo smiled slightly. I still have enough evidence to make sure he never harms anyone again. I'll hand it over to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Let the system do its job. After the lawyer left, Leonardo found Alana in the library, where she was organizing a new shipment of books. I overheard the conversation, she admitted without turning around. Not intentionally, but the walls are thin, he added, moving closer. And Alana finally turned to face him, her eyes shining with restrained emotion. Why, Leonardo? Why give up everything? Because I discovered that everything is relative, he replied, taking another step towards her. The empire I built cost me my essence. It took 5 years in a coma and an extraordinary woman to make me realize that. I did nothing but what I believed was right, she whispered, her face betraying the inner battle she was fighting. You did so much more. Leonardo touched her face gently. You saved me, Alana. Not just by looking after my house or reading to me, but by believing in the man I could be. Leonardo, She hesitated, tears beginning to form in her eyes. This can't happen. I'm your employee, and people will talk. Let them talk, he interrupted gently. I've spent my whole life caring what other people thought, building walls of power and money to protect myself. I don't want to live like that anymore. A sob escaped Alana's lips. I'm afraid, she confessed, afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize you've thrown everything away for an illusion. The only illusion was the life I led before. He held up his trembling hands. The power, the prestige, the people who said they loved me. It was all fake. You're the only real thing I've ever had. How can you be so sure? Because while everyone abandoned me, you stayed. While the world forgot who I was, you preserved my essence. While I slept, you kept alive not only my garden, but my heart. The tears were now flowing freely down Alana's face. Leonardo gently dried them with his thumb, amazed at the vulnerability she was finally allowing herself to show. I can't promise it will be easy, he continued, but I can promise that every day will be real. I'm not the ruthless billionaire anymore, and I don't want to be. I just want to be the man with the yellow roses. If you'll have me that way. Alana closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. It was always this man I saw in you, she murmured. He's the one I've always waited for. The moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor. They separated quickly, but something fundamental had changed. The barriers that kept them apart, social position, money, power, had dissolved, leaving only the truth of their feelings. Winter arrived in Boston with unexpected ferocity, covering the Blackwood mansion in a white blanket of snow. On a December morning, Leonardo watched from the covered veranda as Alana supervised the installation of the Christmas decorations, her melodious voice guiding the hired workers. The lights need to follow the outline of the windows, she instructed, her red coat contrasting with the white landscape. Mr. Blackwood has always preferred elegant decor. Nothing excessive. You really know all my tastes, Leonardo commented. Approaching, Alana turned around in surprise. A faint blush tinged her cheeks, something that had happened frequently since their conversation in the library. It's my job to know, she replied softly. Do you still insist on keeping up this professional facade? He asked, his voice just loud enough for her to hear. Before Alana could reply, a familiar car pulled up in the driveway of the mansion. Victoria Blackwood, Leonardo's sister, emerged from the vehicle, her elegant posture not completely concealing her nervousness. Leo, she called out, hesitantly. Can we talk? Leonardo felt Alana tensing beside him. She knew Victoria's story of betrayal well, having silently witnessed her family's abandonment of her during her coma. I'll make some tea, Alana murmured, but Leonardo gently held her arm. Stay, he ordered. You're part of this now. Victoria watched the interaction with obvious curiosity, her calculating eyes assessing the closeness between her brother and the housekeeper. In the office, the silence weighed like lead. Victoria sat rigidly, her hands restless on her lap. I hear you're not going to sue Palmer, she began. Why? Because revenge won't bring back the 5 years I lost, Leonardo replied, noticing how Alana stood discreetly near the door, a comforting presence. "Leo, about that time, when I sold the shares, when you betrayed me, you mean—" Victoria shuddered. "Palmer said the company was going bankrupt, that it was our only chance of salvaging something. I believed him. And you didn't even think to wait for me to wake up, to fight for what we'd built." "I was scared," Victoria burst out, tears welling up in her eyes. "Dad always said I was weak, that I would depend on you forever. When Palmer offered a way out—" "You proved Dad right," Leonardo added bitterly. A sob escaped Victoria. "I've come to ask for forgiveness," she whispered. "Dubai is beautiful, but it's empty. I miss my brother." Leonardo closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his sister's words. That's when he felt Alana's hand on his shoulder, a soft but meaningful touch. "Sometimes," Alana said for the first time, her voice gentle, "the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need our compassion the most." Victoria looked at Alana with surprise, as if only now did she really notice her. "You're her, aren't you? The woman who took care of everything while you were on the run," Leonardo added, but his tone had softened. "Yes, she is. Alana taught me something about forgiveness and second chances." "I've noticed that you've changed," Victoria commented, studying her brother. "There's something different about you." "I lost an empire," Leonardo replied, reaching for Alana's hand that still rested on his shoulder, "but I found something more valuable." The gesture didn't go unnoticed by Victoria, whose eyes widened in understanding. "We're finding out," Leonardo interrupted softly, "and you, Victoria, are discovering that family goes beyond shares and fortunes." Victoria wiped away her tears, a shaky smile appearing on her lips. "I think we're all learning hard lessons. Christmas is coming," Alana commented, her casual tone carrying significant weight. "The mansion always seems livelier during the holidays." Leonardo understood the implicit suggestion. "Maybe," he said, looking at his sister, "it's time to rebuild some ties." "Would you take me back?" Victoria asked, her voice small. "After everything. I'm no longer the same man you betrayed, Victoria. That man would have closed his doors forever, but I've learned that sometimes the doors we keep open are the ones that heal us the most." Alana gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze, a silent gesture of approval. Victoria watched the interaction, something softening in her expression. "You really have changed," she murmured, "and I guess I should thank you for that," she added, glancing at Alana. "No," Alana replied gently. "Thank your brother for choosing to be a better person." When Victoria left, promising to return for Christmas, Leonardo and Alana remained in the office, watching the snow fall through the window. "You're transforming my life in ways I never imagined," he murmured, pulling her close. "No," she smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're just allowing your true self to shine through." Christmas was approaching, and the Blackwood mansion was coming alive with preparations for the family dinner. Leonardo watched in amazement as Alana transformed each room with subtle touches of decoration, maintaining the elegance that had always characterized the house, but adding a warmth that had long been absent. One particularly cold afternoon, while supervising the assembly of the Christmas tree in the main hall, Leonardo received an unexpected visitor. Maxwell arrived agitated, carrying a thick briefcase. "We need to talk," the lawyer announced, his countenance serious. "In private." In the office, Maxwell spread out documents on the table. "I've been looking into Alana's past," he began, ignoring Leonardo's expression of displeasure. "There's something you need to know." "I don't want to know anything that she hasn't chosen to tell me herself," Leonardo interrupted firmly. "That's different," Maxwell insisted. "Remember the housing project in Augusta? The one you mentioned that meant so much to her?" Leonardo nodded, an uneasy feeling growing in his chest. "Her mother, Regina Winters, wasn't just any resident," Maxwell continued, pulling out an old document. "She was the community leader who fought for the project. She was the one who first brought your company closer to the community." "What?" "There's more." Maxwell passed over another document. "Regina passed away 6 years ago, just before Alana came to work here. But before that, she wrote several letters to you, thanking you not only for the houses, but for saving her community." Leonardo picked up the letters with trembling hands. Regina Winters. Elegant handwriting told a story of gratitude and hope. In her last letter, written from the hospital, she asked Leonardo to take care of her daughter Alana, although the letter had never been sent. "Why didn't she ever tell me?" Leonardo murmured. "Maybe for the same reason you kept the thank you letters hidden away," Maxwell replied softly. "Some truths are too precious to be shared lightly." At that moment, a soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Alana entered, carrying a tray of tea, but stopped abruptly at the sight of the scattered documents. "Ah," she said, her face paling as she recognized her mother's handwriting. "I see you finally figured it out. Why didn't you tell me?" Leonardo asked gently. Maxwell discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone. Alana placed the tray on a side table, her hands shaking slightly. "How could I?" she replied, her voice breaking. "At first, when I came to work here, I was angry. Angry because my mother died, believing that you were different from the other rich businessmen. Then I started working here and discovered that she was right," Alana continued, silent tears streaming down her face. "I saw the letters you kept, the secret social projects, the man behind the empire. When the accident happened, I couldn't leave you." Leonardo stood up, approaching her. "Your mother wrote to me asking me to look after you, and in the end, it was me who looked after you." She smiled through her tears. "Mom always said that the universe has a peculiar sense of humor. Why did you keep hiding it after I woke up? Because I wanted you to see me for who I am, not as Regina Winter's daughter," she replied. "And why? Because I was afraid you'd think my feelings were just gratitude or obligation." Leonardo touched her face gently, drying her tears. "Are they?" "No," she whispered. "What I feel for you goes beyond any debt or gratitude. It happened gradually, during those silent years when I got to know your heart through the little things I discovered about you. When you woke up, it only confirmed everything I already knew. And what did you know? That behind the ruthless billionaire there was a man who treasured letters of thanks, a man who planted yellow roses for a promise, a man who deserved to be loved not for the empire he built, but for the heart he hid." Leonardo pulled her into his arms, feeling how perfectly she fit against his chest. "Your mother was right about me," he murmured against her hair, "but not in the way she imagined. It wasn't me who looked after you, it was you who saved me." "Maybe," Alana replied softly. "We saved each other." Outside, the snow was starting to fall again, covering Boston in its white blanket. Inside the office of the Blackwood mansion, two souls were finally finding their full truth, united by bonds stronger than gratitude, deeper than duty, truer than any empire ever built. The Blackwood mansion shone under the Christmas lights on the night of December 24th. The snow was falling softly outside, creating a picture postcard scene, while inside the house the preparations for the family dinner were entering their final phase. Leonardo was adjusting his tie in front of the mirror when he heard a soft knock on his bedroom door. Alana entered, wearing a dark green dress that made her look even more elegant than usual. "Victoria just called," she informed him. "She's on her way to the airport." "You look beautiful," he replied, momentarily forgetting any other worries. A delicate blush tinged Alana's cheeks. "Leonardo, we need to talk about tonight. Your sister, the guests. Maybe it's better if I don't take part in the dinner." "What are you talking about? People are going to comment. The housekeeper sitting at the table with her family." Leonardo crossed the room with determined steps, taking her hands in his. "You're not just the housekeeper, and you know it. The outside world won't understand," she insisted, although her eyes betrayed the internal conflict she felt. "The outside world spent 5 years turning its back on me, while you preserved not only this house, but my very essence," he replied. "I'm not going to hide my feelings for you to please society." Before Alana could reply, the doorbell rang. The first guests had arrived. The evening progressed like a carefully choreographed ballet. Maxwell arrived with his wife, followed by some old friends who had remained loyal during the difficult years. Victoria appeared last, bearing gifts and a barely concealed nervousness. During the cocktail preceding the meal, Leonardo noticed the curious looks and discreet whispers when he insisted that Alana remain by his side, not as an employee, but as his companion. Victoria, surprisingly, was the first to show open support, pulling Alana into a conversation about Christmas preparations. "You've transformed this house," Victoria commented, looking around. "I've never seen it so alive." "Alana has that gift," Leonardo replied, moving closer. "She sees beauty where others see only objects." "Like she saw in you," Victoria smiled, genuine understanding in her eyes. The moment was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Charlotte. She hadn't been invited, but had apparently decided to make one last attempt to regain her place in the Blackwoods' world. "Leo, darling," she exclaimed, ignoring the surprised looks from those present. "I couldn't spend Christmas without—" Her words died when she saw Leonardo with his arm protectively around Alana's waist. The shock on his face quickly turned to disdain. "So the rumors are true," she said acidly. "The great Leonardo Blackwood and his housekeeper, Charlotte." Leonardo's voice sounded dangerously calm. "You weren't invited. I don't need an invitation. After all, I was almost the mistress of this house." "But you weren't," Alana replied softly, surprising everyone, "because you chose the empire, not the man." Charlotte laughed, a cruel sound. "And you think that's different? A servant girl who seduced her vulnerable boss?" "Enough," Victoria's voice cut through the air like a whip. "You have no right to judge true love when all you know is interests and appearances." The silence that followed was deafening. Charlotte looked around, realizing that she would find no allies there. With one last look of contempt, she turned on her heels and left. After her departure, Alana tried to pull away, but Leonardo kept her firmly by his side. Turning to the guests, he raised his glass. "Tonight," he began, his voice clear and firm, "we celebrate not only Christmas, but also new beginnings. For 5 years, while I slept, this extraordinary woman kept alive not only my home, but my most precious legacy, my humanity. Today, in front of all of you, I want you to know, I love her. Not like a boss loves an employee, but like a man loves the woman who saved him from himself." Silent tears streamed down Alana's face as those present, led by Victoria, applauded. Maxwell raised his glass in a silent toast, a smile of approval on his face. "I didn't have to do that," Alana whispered. "Yes, I did," he replied, touching her cheek gently, "because you taught me that true value doesn't lie in empires or fortunes, but in the courage to be authentic." That night, as the snow continued to fall outside, the Blackwood mansion witnessed not just a Christmas dinner, but the celebration of a love that transcended social classes, prejudices, and expectations. A love born in the silence of 5 years of dedication, now blossoming under the lights of a Christmas that marked not an end, but a glorious new beginning. The morning of January 1st arrived with blinding clarity, the snow in the garden reflecting the winter sun like 1,000 diamonds. Leonardo woke up early, as had become his habit since leaving the hospital, and found Alana in her favorite place, the greenhouse attached to the mansion, where she kept some of the most delicate plants alive during the harsh Boston winter. "I knew I'd find you here," he said softly, watching as she tended to a small yellow rosebud. "It's an experiment," she explained, without turning around. "I'm trying to make the roses bloom out of season. For your mother." Leonardo felt his heart expand at this simple gesture, further proof of how deeply she understood him. He moved closer, placing a small velvet box on the work table. Alana finally turned around, her eyes widening as she recognized the object. "Leonardo, before you say anything," he interrupted her gently, "I want you to know that I've thought a lot about this, about us, about what people will say. And I've decided that I've spent enough time caring about other people's opinions. 5 years in a coma taught me that life is too precious to be lived by other people's standards." Alana looked at the box, her hands shaking slightly. "People will say it's too soon. The same people who abandoned me when I lost everything, who judged you for your loyalty. I don't care about them anymore." With delicate fingers, he opened the box, revealing not an ostentatious ring like the one he had given Charlotte years ago, but a delicate piece with a single yellow rose in gold, small diamonds forming dewdrops on its petals. "It's beautiful," Alana whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "It was made especially for you," Leonardo explained. "Every detail has been thought out to represent our history. The yellow rose you preserved, the tears we shed, the beauty that is born even in the harshest winters. Leonardo, let me finish," he asked softly. "When I woke up from my coma, I thought I had lost everything, my empire, my family, my purpose. But you showed me that sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters." Taking her hands between his, Leonardo continued, "You met me at my most vulnerable. You looked after me when I couldn't give back. You loved the man I was before I even remembered him. I'm not asking you to be my wife because I need someone to run this house. You already do that better than anyone ever has. I'm asking because I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the love you offered me when I had nothing to give in return." Tears were running freely down Alana's face now. "You always had something to offer," she replied in a broken voice. "Your heart, the same heart that planted yellow roses for a promise, that kept thank you letters as treasures, that never stopped caring even when the world said you should. So, is that a yes? In response, Alana moved closer, touching his face with infinite tenderness. It's a yes to all the mornings I woke up determined to keep your roses alive, for all the nights I read to you, hoping my voice would reach your dreams, for all the times I chose to believe in the man I saw through the pages of the books you kept, the photos you hid, the memories you preserved. Leonardo slid the ring onto his finger, noticing how the jewel seemed to have been made to be there. Outside, the January sun bathed the snow-covered garden, creating a spectacle of light and shade. Inside the greenhouse, protected from the cold, a small yellow rosebud was beginning to bloom out of season, as if celebrating the moment. Do you know what else I learned during the coma? Leonardo murmured, pulling her into his arms. What? That sometimes we need to sleep for a long time to finally wake up to true love. The kiss that followed was as soft as the snow falling outside, as deep as the roots of the roses that Alana cared for so lovingly, and as promising as the dawn of a new year that marked not just the beginning of a marriage, but the continuation of a love story that began in the silence of a coma and blossomed in the dedication of a heart that never stopped believing. If you had to choose between recovering a financial empire or preserving a true love born in the most unlikely circumstances, which would you choose and why? Your participation in the channel is very important. Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.